Louis Vuitton is the leading luxury brand in the world, with an estimated value of nearly $30 billion. Its history extends back to the 19th century and begins with a homeless adolescent who could only dream of achieving prosperity. Without money or food, he performed odd jobs with artists and craftspeople to live, barely making money but gaining critical skills that led to the invention of modern baggage and the establishment of a billion-dollar enterprise. Louis Vuitton was born and raised in Nancy, France, in the 19th century. His parents were a farmer and a milliner. During this time, France was still recovering from the Napoleonic Wars, and many farmers, like the Vuittons, were facing financial ruin. Louis was compelled to work on the family farm beginning at an early age. From dusk until morning, he cultivated and harvested crops, tended to the livestock, and stacked firewood. At age 10, life became even more challenging for Louis. His father remarried shortly after his mother passed away. As evil as the monsters in fairy tales, Louis's stepmother was a vile woman. She made Louis's life miserable until he had had enough. After Louis reached the age of 13, he snuck away from his family's farm and made his way to Paris without any money or food. Louis was fortunate to find odd employment with artisans and craftsmen who taught him to work with metal, stone, textiles, and wood. Despite this, he was unable to afford accommodation and became homeless. He often slept in the woods with nothing but a cloak for warmth. At the time, the first train line to Paris had only recently opened. The industry started to flourish as travel became more accessible. Craftsmen seized on this need by creating bespoke boxes for aristocracy. They frequently traveled with paintings, instruments, and furniture, necessitating boxes that could accommodate their possessions and sustain extended journeys. Additionally, they required assistance in packing their belongings to prevent breakage. Louis opted to seek employment in the trade because he had acquired some of the required abilities en route to Paris. Luckily, a tradesman named Monsieur Marichal hired Louis as an apprentice. Although Louis did not earn much money, his drive to study reaped benefits in more ways than one. He gained the favor of Marichal's clients. The French Empress then chose him as her personal boxmaker. After working for the Empress for a year, Louis was in greater demand and launched his first shop. Early on, Louis conceived of innovative new goods that revolutionized the industry. Historically, rectangular leather boxes with a rectangular shape were the norm. The dome-shaped covers prevented water from penetrating the leather by preventing water from pooling on top. This made stacking the boxes impossible and loading them time-consuming. Louis experimented with new materials before settling on canvas as a solution to these challenges. Canvas was lighter, more water-resistant, and more resilient than leather. This allowed boxes to have simple, flat lids, allowing them to be stacked and loaded more easily. And despite the fact that the gray tint was a result of the use of waterproofing agents, the surface appeared cleaner and more contemporary. Louis fashioned a slat trunk from canvas cloth. His innovative product ushered in the contemporary era of luggage. Within 2 years, despite initial skepticism from consumers regarding its benefits, the product became a must-have, attractive accessory. Following this, Louis endeavored to replicate his success with a new invention, handbags. Society did not accept handbags at the time. Many individuals claimed that they were unattractive, cumbersome, and would lead women to sustain injuries. Nevertheless, Louis believed that handbags had potential and began manufacturing them from canvas. As a result, more styles were demanded so that women could wear them with a variety of ensembles. Louis was eventually unable to keep up and enlisted his son, George, for assistance. Similar to his father, George developed innovative concepts that altered the industry norm. He invented a tumbler lock that made trunks become treasure chests and prevented theft. Prior to then, the majority of trunks had locks that could be easily picked. The desirability of the family's goods increased. But production ceased shortly thereafter. Louis became homeless a second time when a war broke out and ruined his business. The Franco-Prussian War broke out at the height of Louis's business. Louis and his family had to abandon their house and workshop in Asnières, a suburb of Paris, and relocate to the city. There, they lived in a shelter with thousands of other refugees. Food became so scarce that the Vuittons nearly perished from hunger. Louis returned home at the end of the war. His materials were stolen and his workshop was demolished, which upset him. Louis wasted little time reconstructing his workshop and locating a new place for it with the remaining of his savings. Fortuitously for him, property values declined as a result of the war. Louis took advantage of the opportunity and bought a store in an expensive neighborhood. Within a few months of reopening, the company was once again thriving, and orders poured in from all over the world. Now, Louis felt compelled to attempt new and more audacious ideas. The technology was sufficiently advanced at the time to print custom patterns on fabric. Since canvas is a cloth, Louis was able to produce a series of trunks with a striped pattern. The success of the new design was immediate. It gave people a means to distinguish themselves and demonstrate their modernity. It also made it harder for counterfeiters to replicate Louis's work. After receiving numerous foreign orders, Louis launched a business in London. The expansion led to the diversification of his customers, which now comprised a greater number of royals and explorers. From that point forward, Louis was recognized as the only designer whose items could be found in both affluent homes and exotic rainforests. Louis eventually decided to publish his first catalog to facilitate ordering. It was a sensible decision that was certain to propel the company to new heights. In the same year, though, an unforeseen tragedy derailed Louis's efforts. Louis died unexpectedly at home at the age of 72. His reason of death is still unknown. Georges was now responsible for completing his father's unfinished projects. Georges wasted little time expanding his company and headed to the United States to attend the World's Fair. He realized from this experience that he required an international sales network. Fortunately, he encountered John Wanamaker at the fair, who was able to assist him. John pioneered the department store concept and created the price tag. Upon meeting Georges, he began selling LV merchandise in his New York department store. It was the first store in the United States to carry the brand. Then, in remembrance of his father, Georges designed a flowery monogram consisting of an interlocking L and V. Customers were surprised to discover the monogram on merchandise. They were accustomed to adorning bags with merely their own names or initials. However, ultimately the times changed, and the new style became popular. Then on, Georges and his son Gaston continued to build new designs in Louis's footsteps. Notable creations include the Keepall, a bag for everyday use, the No, a bag for carrying wine and champagne, and the Alma, a remake of a Coco Chanel commission. By that time, Georges had visited the entire United States and established a distribution network. Like his father, he was destined to lead the company to greater heights. However, history sadly repeated itself. He died, leaving Gaston to fulfill Louis's unfinished ambitions on his own. Gaston had an awful beginning. Due to the outbreak of the Second World War, contracts were cancelled. Gaston was compelled to close the LV factory and stores. In Louis Vuitton, a French saga, the author asserts that Gaston was so desperate for survival that he worked with Germany's ruling party. Allegedly, Gaston authorized the production of commemorative busts and established a shop in Vichy. The source also alleges that although stores such as Van Cleef and Arpels were closed, only LV was permitted to remain open. A representative for Louis Vuitton later stated, "This is ancient history. We are varied and tolerant, just like a modern business should be." Gaston charged his sons Henry, Jacques, and Claude with rebuilding the company when the war ended. With their father's leadership, the sons ensured that each year new baggage types were produced. However, after Gaston's death, sales declined. Hard-sided baggage lost popularity. Henry, Jacques, and Claude disagreed on how to handle the business. So they requested Henry Rackemeyer, the husband of their sister, to take over. Henry had by then formed and profitably sold a steel trading company. He utilized his sharp commercial skills to transform LV from wholesale to retail and to enter the Asian market. Within 6 years, LV's sales increased from $20 million to more than $250 million. During this time, Henry took LV public. Following the sale of more than 1 million shares, the company's stock was exhausted. 2 months later, the share price of LV began to vary. Since counterfeit goods were on the rise, analysts worried that sales could fall. Despite this, Henry continued to open stores around the world. Within a few years, he disproved the analysts' assumptions. LV achieved approximately $1 billion in sales and joined with Moët Hennessy, a maker of champagne and cognac, to establish LVMH, a conglomerate of luxury goods. The objective of both businesses was to prevent a hostile acquisition. While the acquisition enabled LV to increase its assets, Henry became entangled in management issues with Alain Chevalier, the president of Moët Hennessy. Henry invited Bernard Arnault, a real estate developer, to be his ally in order to acquire control. Bernard consented, but Henry soon understood that Bernard had his own aspirations. Bernard purchased a controlling stake in LVMH while gaining the support of the Moët and Hennessy dynasties. Afterward, Henry and Bernard engaged in a legal dispute. The judges sided with Bernard and compelled Henry to resign. From that point forward, LV slipped behind other luxury brands. It was believed to be a little company, and its revenues dropped. No journalist had the courage to praise the brand. Things did not change until LV, under the direction of Yves Carcel, followed in Louis's footsteps and developed a novel and audacious concept. For its 100th anniversary, the business invited designers like Vivienne Westwood, Isaac Mizrahi, and Manolo Blahnik to produce handbags with its emblem. Such collaborations were nearly unheard of at the time, and luxury purses were non-existent. Nonetheless, the cooperation was well received and helped LV and handbags return to prominence. The following year, LV appointed designer Marc Jacobs as their creative director. Marc reinvigorated the business by introducing its first ready-to-wear collection, designing its iconic Vernis series, and partnering with prominent artists, beginning with Steven Sprouse and Takashi Murakami. Since then, LV has branched out into watches, jewelry, and sunglasses, and continues to release legendary bags. Additionally, the company continues to produce everything in-house. Craftsmen must undergo a 2-year apprenticeship, and some pieces need 300 steps of assembly. Today, LV is the leading luxury brand in the world, and its market value exceeds $30 billion. This is the story of how a homeless adolescent invented modern luggage and established a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories and guidance from the most successful leaders of the present day.